All righty. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of All Voting is Local, the League of Women Voters, Lansing Area Chapter, and Lansing City Clerk Chris Swope, we just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We are looking forward to this hour, a very comprehensive discussion of election administration and some issues facing local clerks all throughout Michigan and frankly, the state of our democracy. So we really want to thank our special guest, Chris Swope, the Lansing City Clerk. I'd like to quickly turn it over to my friend and colleague, Donna Mullins, the president of the Lansing Area Chapter for the League of Women Voters. She's going to play a short video for us, and then we will kick it to our moderator, Jacqueline Stewart, to get us started. So Donna, would you like to play that short video?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks so much.
Hi, that's obviously not a very timely video. We had a few technical problems, but now that's all fixed up. We're really happy to join with All Voting is Local to give you the chance to learn more about the work of Lansing City Clerk Chris Swope, and more importantly, the election process. Chris is respected throughout the state for his outstanding work, and our community is lucky to have him. I do want to thank especially Ben Gardner and all the crew from All Voting is Local for organizing this webinar and their dedication to voting rights. We share the same values and mission. A group of us have put together a number of questions for Chris. Facebook Live viewers can put questions in the comment sections, and I'm very pleased to introduce Jacqueline Stewart as tonight's moderator. Jacqueline, take it away.
Jacqueline, you're muted.
Okay, I'll start again. So Chris, thanks especially for being here today to talk about how the election administration process has worked in recent elections. The job of a city clerk is an important one with many responsibilities. But in the past, you have all done this job with some anonymity, but not so in today's climate. So I'm so glad that you're taking the initiative to educate the public about what you do before, during, and after elections. In our conversation after your presentation, I'll have some questions for you, and the audience are invited to write their questions in the Q&A. I'll try to keep us on our schedule to leave time for audience questions at the end, but if we don't get all of your questions answered during the allotted time, then we'll forward the questions, we'll record this and forward the questions to Chris and maybe Donna as well, so you can get your answers later. So Chris, are you ready to take it away?
I am ready. Thank you. And thank you so much. Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for all you do for our community and the partnership that we've had. And thank you to All Voting is Local. You both are such well-respected and important organizations. So thank you for what you do. I'm Chris Swope. I'm the elected city clerk of the city of Lansing, which is Michigan's 5th largest city. We're neck and neck with Ann Arbor. But we edge them out again. So we have 86,000 registered voters in the city of Lansing. And when I ran for my first term, my theme and what I ran on was to make voting easier. I think it should be fairly easy to vote. And I have worked for 16 years to do that. I just got reelected to my 5th term that I'll be starting in January. we have had a lot of change with elections recently. The proposal 3 of 2018 really put into our state constitution some very important and strong protections. For the first time, you know, I had been fighting for years to try and get the legislature to allow every voter in Michigan to be eligible for an absentee ballot. And we finally got that right for everyone through Proposal 3 and several other important rights, including the right to register up to and on election day. So, you know, those were adopted in 2018. Most communities, the city of Lansing, we had elections in 2019. And then, as you can remember, 2020 came and many communities across the state of Michigan had not had any elections with the new constitutional protections. And with the additional intricacies of running elections during a worldwide pandemic, we really had a lot of clerks that had trial by fire. And I was glad that I was able to assist with some advice on some things that we had implemented in 2019 in that odd year city election, so that a lot of people could take advantage. I have served as the president of our state association 2 different times. It's a 1-year term, and then but I went through and repeated it again. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. But it's something I really believe in and care about. And I have served for many, many years on our legislative committee, and then the Municipal Clerk Association works cooperatively with the County Clerk Association in a group we call the Council of Election Officials, where we also work on legislation and try and keep things moving forward for voters in Michigan. And I can tell you, you know, things worked pretty well. There were a lot of bumps in 2020. Partly, you know, some of it was communications with the state. The post office was having issues, you know, with timely delivery. So we took a lot of extra steps, and you know, we were trying to keep voters' health safe, and we continue to do that. So, you know, with the new constitutional amendment, it's been interpreted that we can send absentee ballot applications to everyone. And I've continued to do that through this year, since we know the pandemic is still going on. So that was done in 2020, and for the city of Lansing, at least, was continued in 21. And, you know, we will continue to evaluate that going forward. But I can tell you, we had a safe, secure election in Michigan. I know a large number of the clerks, and I have faith that they did everything they could do and ran honest elections, and that votes were counted accurately.
Thanks, Chris. I have some nuts and bolts questions, so let's start at the very bottom.
Okay.
Can you walk us through the process that goes on in the clerk's office for processing voter registration forms for new voters, voter registration, whether it's through the city clerk's office or whether it's through some League of Women Voters rally, they finally end up in the city clerk's office. What happens then?
So what we do, there are other transactions that come from the Secretary of State directly, and those kind of happen electronically and automatically. But the ones that we're talking about are the paper forms that the voter fills out, signs, and submits either through a drive or sends directly to us. We have a statewide voter registration system. It's a one database, and it's called the Qualified Voter File. So when we get a registration, we actually type in their driver's license number, their last name, first initial, and date of birth. And that's called the quick match. And that tells us if they're already registered somewhere in Michigan. So if they are already registered, a lot of their information will carry over their voting history, and it's really important that we keep that together, and also that we don't have people registered more than once in the state. So that quick match has helped keep the number of duplicate entries down a lot. So then if we find them, we move them in. If not, we create a new registration. We type in their information. If they have a Michigan driver's license number or Michigan ID, we include that, and that will eventually bring their signature in from their driver's license, their electronic signature. We also have the ability to scan their signature from the voter registration form, so that if we don't have a driver's license, you can register to vote in Michigan if you're a college student from Washington, D.C. or wherever. You can register to vote here. You're not required to have a Michigan driver's license or ID. So we scan those signatures in for future comparison for absentee voting. We look up their address through, we put it in, it automatically figures out what precincts and districts they're in, because a big part of voting is who you're voting for, what county commission district, what state house district, what congressional district. So all that fills in based on their address, and then we send them a voter ID card, and they're ready to go.
It sounds like you have that down. What about when you get the absentee ballot applications, and could you also explain? So you said Lansing is still sending them out. Does that mean that to everyone? Does that mean that other cities by choice might do it differently, or other counties by choice might do it differently?
Yes, others may do it differently by choice, who they're sending it to. I determined that the COVID numbers are not to a level that I really want to expose my election workers and the voters themselves to large crowds if it can be avoided. Just giving them the option. They certainly have the right to come and vote in person on election day, but I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of the option. So when we get an absentee ballot application, we look the voter up. We compare the signature on the application to their signature that's on file, which most of the time is their driver's license signature. Sometimes it's that one that we've scanned. And we record the date we got the application. We record the date we're going to send the ballot. And sometimes that's in the future, because we like to get ahead of things. And even before we have the ballots, we're entering this data in so that we can be prepared ahead of time. We assign them a ballot number, and then later we gather those up, and then we print a list of labels for the envelope to mail the ballot out. So we have to watch for things like special mailing addresses and things like that. We also do our best to gather. We ask them to voluntarily provide email and phone number, and we do record that in the system so that we can communicate with the voter later if any questions arise.
So do I understand then, if we're talking to voters in Lansing, East Lansing as well, you don't have to do anything. You will be mailed an application, an absentee ballot application?
You'll be mailed an application, and that's where sometimes people get confused, because there's a list that's called that's traditionally been called the permanent absentee voter list. I've tried to start renaming it the automatic application list, because being on that list doesn't get you a ballot, it gets you an application. You still have to sign an application to get a ballot. Now, sometimes we can pair an election, so a primary and a general, we can use one application for both elections, but you have to apply. People sometimes don't remember that they signed and sent it back an application in prior years and think we've done something differently. It's always been that you have to sign that application for each election or each set of elections.
Okay. And tell me more about this permanent list. How do you get on that list?
You need to just request from your city or township clerk. It's just a checkbox that we do on the qualified voter file. Yeah, we proactively put it out there. The city of Lansing has an online sign up. We put it on the absentee ballot applications so that people can sign up. You know, if they happen to come in and pick up an application and an absentee ballot in person, we have a place where they can sign up. You know, it used to be in Lansing, if you lived in Lansing, one of the qualifications used to be that if you were 60 or over, you would qualify for an absentee ballot. So I used to send out cards wishing people a happy 60th birthday and an invitation to be on the list. But now it's everyone. And we do have on the voter ID card, we do have a little note on there that they can do that. So they can contact our office to be on the automatic application list.
Yeah. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but you mentioned this a minute ago, and so I'd like to know what happens when you get the absentee actual ballots back. When can you start counting them?
We cannot open them until 7 a.m., starting at 7 a.m. election day. And everybody expects us to have the answer by 8 p.m. But you know, depending on the volume, you know, in 2020 in the presidential election, we had about 38,000 absentee ballots.
Wow.
And it was just physically impossible. The legislature did give us a window and they closed it after 2020. So it was just specific to 2020. They gave us the day before where we could open them, but then we could not scan them. We couldn't process them. And we had to recount them the next morning. So while it did give us a little bit of a head start, it also assigned us extra work to do. So it was not the most beneficial. We ended up completing our count of absentee ballots about, I think it was about 8 or 9 a.m. the following morning after election day.
And with the increased number of absentee ballots and everyone expecting the answer right away, that's when you get discussion or contention the following day because people are following the results and notice spikes and so on. So you've explained why that happens, that you can't count ahead of time.
Right. Very, very frequently, you know, just the pool of voters on election day is different than the pool of voters who vote absentee. One example, the first time I ever ran for public office, I ran for first ward of Lansing City Council, and I got the most votes of the people who voted on election day, and I did not get the most votes of the people who voted absentee, and I ended up losing. So, it would really be beneficial if we could have more time. We would like up to a 2-week period where we could process those ballots and scan them in and not release the results, not print any results, not even know the results. I can tell you when my absent voter counting board, when they're working on these ballots, they aren't even looking at them. They're looking at the names, they're counting, they're comparing the ballot stub on the ballot to the number that was assigned to the voter. That's one of our security measures, is we make sure that Jacqueline, if we sent you ballot number 10,003, you have to return ballot number 10,003, or that will become a challenged ballot. So, those are the kinds of things that my workers are working so hard at all day long. And there's nothing that they could learn by, even if they were looking at the ballots, there's it's so spread out. There's no information really to be gained.
Let's turn the attention now to access to election information. So what's your approach to community outreach regarding election information? Do you have methods of communication that you would like to prioritize?
We kind of, we do quite a bit here in the city of Lansing. We do Facebook posts and information. We provide links to the League of Women Voters voter guide on our website. And, try and be proactive about that. But more than about what's going on with the election or who the candidates are, we more try and promote that there is an election, what offices are up. And so we do a lot of communication. And for those people who are voting absentee, we think it's very important for them to have transparency. So we send an email saying that your ballot has been mailed to you or will be mailed to you, depending on how our timing is. And then we send a message to them saying, when we receive their ballot back, we send a message saying we've received your ballot. It's secure. It won't be open till election day, but we've got it. So, and we try and get people to share that information as well. We have a selfie station for people who come in and vote absentee, and we encourage them to take a picture and tag our office, with a hashtag vote Lansing or Lansing votes, and just try and encourage their social networks to do that, to assist us with the outreach. But the reality is every election is driven by the top of the ticket. We just had a mayoral election. We had a 20% turnout. To me, that's a disappointing turnout in such an important office. But you can just predict it in the November, in the 4-year cycle. The presidential year is going to be the highest turnout. The gubernatorial year is going to be the second highest. The mayoral year is going to be the third highest. And then in Lansing, we have a year where half the city council is up, but the mayor's office is not. And that's, the lowest of the 4-year cycle. Yes. And there's just, that's just the reality of it. But we do everything we can to make sure that people know there's an election.
I can hear that. I can hear that. So thinking about barriers to participation, for example, language access, what steps would you take to promote access to the ballot for individuals who don't necessarily speak English as their first language? Would you see a role for community organizations in assisting clerks, maybe recruiting bilingual poll workers?
That would be helpful. That is a situation that we don't have a lot of great answers for. We do not have ballots in multiple languages or instructions in multiple languages. We do have ADA accessible things, but so we have some Braille. We have it's called the Voter Assist Terminal, or VAT, where a voter who is blind or has another disability can independently mark their ballot using a Braille keypad. It's got earphones, and depending on the disability a voter might have, they could plug in their own sip and puff device or toggle and work their way through the ballot that way. Voters also have the right to bring someone with them to assist them to vote. So, if they have, very frequently a younger relative or, another relative can join them in the voting booth and assist them. When we assist a voter, we have to, when it's my election workers, we have to have one Democrat and one Republican help the voter together. So that gets a little bit crowded and complicated, and it's a little bit, then we would almost have to have 2 election workers of, with the second language. We can help them with instructions, and we do have several Spanish-speaking election workers. In 2020, we had a gentleman who was helping us here at our election office at South Washington, and he spoke, I think it's 11 languages. So he was a real help. I want to bring him back in future big elections for the walk-in absentee voters.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about funding, because I can see the enormity of the job even more. I thought I was informed, but I see even more of it now that you're talking. So let's talk a bit about funding. How are elections currently funded in Michigan?
Well, it kind of depends on the election. If it's a city election, it's funded by the city. If it's a state election, it's funded kind of jointly. So there are expenses that the city has that we're not reimbursed for. The biggest thing is always the election workers. You know, they are paid to be there. It's a very important job, and they are paid. The county, in a city election, the county will bill us for the ballot programming and printing that they do. In a state election, the county will just bear that cost. And then some elections are, it's called reimbursable. So the presidential primary, the state reimburses the city and the county for their election-related expenses. When a school district calls a special election, they are required to reimburse the city and county for their election-related expenses. So, you know, it's a strange mix we have. And then the equipment, which, you know, was a very, very large purchase several years ago. You know, the state used federal leftover money from a previous grant cycle to pay for that equipment. But we're coming up on 5 years of having that equipment. And now there are some very expensive maintenance fees that we're going to have to pay on this equipment for the next 5 years that are the local responsibility. So, you know, it's elections are expensive, and you know this infrastructure that we have is expensive.
Are there other sources? I can understand the descriptions you're giving there of, you know, school boards, for example, or the state stepping in. But are there any other sources that clerks can use to secure funding?
You know, we, for example, received a grant from the Center for Tech and Civic Life, a very generous grant for the city of Lansing, and many municipalities across the state of Michigan received a grant from them in 2020. But that's really the only time we've ever had that happen, you know. And as city clerk, when I'm watching the city council take action, and we're accepting dozens of grants for our police force and for various other departments. And you know, it's really interesting how few departments typically get grant funding. So it was great to be part of it. And now the legislature is looking to ban all that.
But well, so that was a one-time deal that in 2020 to get those private grants.
Yes.
What kinds of services were you able to cover with that grant funding that now you're going to have to find another way to pay for?
Well, some of it was specifically COVID related, temporary needs. So, you know, my location here where we run our absent voter counting boards, it uses hot water heat, which doesn't provide any air circulation. And, you know, just because of trying to make sure that we had fresh air, we used a separate heating system that we put in just for the day. So that was quite expensive. We also did things like we added 13 drop boxes throughout the city. We had already had 2, but we added 13 additional ones. 12 of those were funded by Center for Tech and Civic Life. We used that money to pay for postage so that the voters didn't have to put postage on their ballots coming back. And additional election workers, since we had so many absentee ballots, and hazard pay for election workers. So, you know, we felt that they were on the front line, and they really were. You know, you talk about the police and the fire and the healthcare workers being on the front line. Well, those election workers were also on the front line and sometimes crowded locations. So we felt it was important to pay them extra for their work in that election. So it, you know, was really helpful to have that. And some of that, you know, for example, the 13 drop boxes, we still have those. Unfortunately, you know, now we have 13 additional drop boxes that we have to go around and collect from, which is a staff cost that now the city has buried since we don't have the grant funding for that. So, yeah.
So I'm a little concerned that you got extra, you got this private grant money in 2020, but some of the things you're describing are not going to go away in 2022. So election officials around the state have been outspoken about the fact that they need more resources. What do you see the same need for more resources, and how would you advocate for sufficient resources?
Well, first off, we're trying to stop them from prohibiting the, the possibility of grants. And, we work through the legislature. We have a lobbyist that we have permanently, but one of the things that we want to look at is those maintenance fees on the equipment. Maybe that isn't something that needs to be borne locally. And some of the things, sometimes there's a money answer to a problem, and sometimes there's a more logical and way to cure things. So part of the reason that we want to be able to process those absentee ballots for a longer period is so that we can have more safe social distancing and process them in a more reasonable time frame and have fewer errors as we're processing them. In terms of I can tell you it's hard to count to 10 at 4 a.m. when you've been working since 7 a.m. the previous day. Those are some of the struggles that we have. But to be quite honest, this year we haven't had a lot of time to advocate for additional funding as we're busy beating back some bills that we see as voter suppression.
So from the voters' point of view, how would a lack of resources show up on election day? What would a voter see that they might wonder, surely they should be more organized than this, or why are they, what are the kinds of things that a voter might see and not understand that this has got to do with a lack of resources? Well,
if they're voting at the polling place, they might see a longer line. They might see fewer election workers, since, as indicated, they're one of the big drivers of cost. If a community were to have to forego the maintenance on their equipment because they couldn't afford the fees, it's possible that they could have some equipment failures and later results. So, if there's a line at 8 o'clock on election day, the voters still get to vote. So if we're unable to put enough election workers in the field, you've got people lined up possibly all day long. That's going to be felt when we have the results. And there's also the things that we're able to do, that we think are important, but we train all of our election workers for almost every election, even though we're only required by law to train them every 2 years. That's one place we could cut if we had to, is say, well, we're only going to train in even years, which means that these people who work in a polling place twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, they have to know a lot, and that's easy to forget if you're not, if you're not doing it, and if you're not refreshed and retrained. We have, we call them super chairs. They're people that have a geographic area to cover, that if they run out of a supply, they can get it to them, and just help provide that backup extra resource. If we were to have to cut them out, there's just elections are important, and they should be treated as such in our funding.
And it sounds like they're very labor intensive as well. There's a couple of new concerns for the next election around the issue of safety. You've mentioned the coronavirus with respect to your workers, if they had more time, they could work more distance from each other instead of all showing up the same day to all be crowded together. What about from the point of view of the voters? You anticipate that you'll still be thinking about that next year, I think.
Well, it's unfortunately it's looking that way. You know, when if you have a line of voters, it's hard to ask them to be 6 feet apart. You know, and it's been determined that we, since voting is a constitutional right, that we can't require masks of the voters. So you know, we do what we can to protect people. I'm requiring my election workers, you know, to follow the guidelines of whatever building they're in. So the city of Lansing had a mask mandate in place, and so I required my election workers in city buildings to wear masks, and instructed them, you know, to follow the guidelines as election workers, as my employees, of whatever location they were working in. But you know, when it's the public and there's a lot of people coming in, it just raises the risk. It raises the risk level.
And not something that you can mandate. So what about, do you have any concerns yourself about intimidation on election day? Or do you hear that from other clerks?
You know, there have been, we have not seen much of that in Lansing. You know, each political party, as well as some other organizations, have the ability to send challengers into the polling places, but they are not allowed to interact with the voters. They have to interact with the election workers. So, you know, we've had some very slight instances where they've challenged someone or attempted to ask someone, but it's more going to the polling place. I think, you know, that anybody can be 100 feet outside of a polling place and campaign. And, you know, I think we were fearful that we would see, you know, people outside of polling places attempting to intimidate voters in 2020. Fortunately, in Lansing, we did not see that.
Great. So if you think about the things that need to be done in the lead up to an election and how labor intensive it is and how much staff you need, what would be your vision for ensuring fully trained or fully staffed precinct locations in the future? How would that look to you? And is there a place for volunteers?
We're always looking for new election workers because, you know, people love to do it, but then they move or get a job where they can't get a random Tuesday in the, you know, November or August off. So we're always looking for new election workers, and we do use volunteers for other duties in preparation for an election. We have a team of 8 women who have helped us through the past several elections. And they'll come here and help us get absentee ballots ready to go out in the mail, and, you know, do all the labeling and all that physical labor that that would just be very difficult for my staff to do on our own. We would be struggling. So there's a huge place for that, as well as you know, the voter outreach and education things that we do. Groups like the League of Women Voters, you know, will arrange, for example, with Lansing Community College, we for National Voter Registration Day, we arranged to have you know, a space there, and we staffed that with mostly volunteers. So it's a very important part, and it gives organizations a feeling of pride and the ability to help with something that they believe is important, and it helps the voters and it helps us.
What about recruiting poll workers from both parties? I remember hearing that was difficult last year.
Well, under Michigan law, to be a poll worker, you do have to declare a political party on your application. And we are required to have at least one Republican and one Democrat in each polling place. And we're required to the best of our ability, have fairly equal representation. Well, I can tell you most communities in Michigan are not 50-50 in their community. Even if a district, even if a congressional district is 50-50, the city of Lansing is not 50-50, nor is the city of Williamson or the city of Mason or the multiple townships that make up a huge portion of the population. So most clerks, I think, struggle to get people who are of the party that's not the majority of their jurisdiction. I struggle to get Republicans in Lansing. Other jurisdictions struggle to get Democrats. And people mostly want to work in their own community. So, so that is part of the struggle that we go through.
So you don't have to work in your own community, but that's what volunteers would prefer to do.
Correct. And, it used to be that you had to work in your own county. That was one that I pushed really hard to get the state to change. And they did change that, quite a number of years ago, maybe even a dozen years ago. If you think of Lansing, we're up in the northwest corner of Ingham County. We actually spill over into Eaton County, and we have a 425 area in Clinton County. And yet I wasn't supposed to have the Eaton County people working in any precinct except the 2 Eaton County precincts. And yet they were so close. And, so I was able to get that changed, and that has helped a bit, but still most people prefer to be close to home. And it's a long day. So, they want to be able to go home for lunch or, maybe let their dog out or whatever. So they don't want to go super far most of the time.
So you've already referred to this a couple of times, but let's turn for the next few minutes to the elephant in the room, because there's this petition circulating called Secure Vote Michigan. If it's successful, it will become legislation, and that will have an impact on the process that we've just been talking about. The ballot petition would, among other things, ban the unsolicited mailing of absentee ballots, implement a new voter ID law, and prohibit private funding for local clerk's office. So I want to ask you about your views on this ballot petition, but specifically, I'd like you to address each one of the things that we've been talking about one by one. So how would this impact your current process of voter registration? Would it?
It would hugely impact the voter registration. We would not be able to work in partnership with groups such as the League of Women Voters or other groups. It's questionable whether we would even be able to do things like set up a tent at Lansing Community College, because it could be argued. And by the way, the wording of the language prohibits in-kind contributions from groups or individuals. So that means you cannot donate your time. Now, groups could still, to be fair, they could still do it independently and then turn the forms into us, but we could have no part of organizing it unless we entirely fund the whole operation and do not take any in-kind contributions, which space, on a college campus or in a high school can be construed as an in-kind contribution. People volunteering their time can be definitely construed as an in-kind contribution. So, we're concerned about that. And the wording of the funding portion goes so far that I think it would prohibit schools or churches from donating their space to be election sites. Even schools, even in a school election, when they have to reimburse us, because it says it has to be appropriated by the city or county or state for elections. So, it would just really hamper our ability to run elections. And, many churches don't want to be in the business of renting their space out. They rather just have it be simple and they just let us use their space. And yeah.
So, and that overlaps with your resources, because if it has to become a commercial transaction, then that's back to where do where's
Right.
the funding going to come from?
Where do we get the funding? How do we determine what is the fair market price of using a school gymnasium for, the polls are open for 13 hours, but we're there setting up and we're there afterwards. So at least 15 hours. What's the fair market price of that? And who determines that?
That's a huge impact on funding. Are there other funding issues that you can think of that are related to this bill or this petition?
Well, as I indicated, the volunteers that we use to stuff the ballots, I don't think that would be permitted either. Those I think are the main things. Are the polling places and the ability to work cooperatively to encourage people to get registered to vote.
And you described very well the team of volunteers that come and do invisible things before the election, before election day, and those volunteers then would be out of the picture. What about, are there any other issues about staffing elections? You couldn't use volunteers. You're going to use more of your money to try to pay for locations. What other issues about funding or staffing?
I think that's the. The lack of ability to receive any direct grants. I don't know how we would have gotten through 2020 if we had not gotten some of that funding. So that would be a challenge. We have our drop boxes. Some of them, well, most of them are at city locations, but we have 2 of them at Capillary Transportation Authority. So would those be called into question because they're not on our property? Is that an in-kind donation? And it would just cause us to question a lot.
What would you predict would be the impact on absentee voting and related to that, voter access?
Well, particularly when you look at the portion about not the lack of ability to send absentee ballot applications unsolicited. Again, during this pandemic, we've been doing that. My perspective is a piece of paper. You can write on a piece of paper, any piece of paper, please send me an absentee ballot application, or please send me an absentee ballot. You sign it. And that has become an absentee ballot application. So does that mean I can't give anybody any paper, any blank paper where they could write on it? It just kind of becomes absurd when you really extend the broadness of the way this thing has been drafted.
So, Chris, I've asked the questions that occurred to me when I saw what was in the this petition, but did I miss something? Is there something else that when you see this that worries you?
Well, one of the biggest things that worries me is that they're going out and saying, just sign this to put it on the ballot and then the voters will decide. But the reality is the voters will never see this because the current legislature, if they get the signatures, the current legislature will just adopt this and the governor will not have the authority to veto it. To me, they're doing an end run around the voters. So I think it's important that people know that this will not put it on the ballot. This will make it law.
My lips are sealed. So let's go back and talk for a minute about what happens after an election. So where do the ballots go on election night? Where do they go after election night? How does the clerk ensure that the equipment and the ballots are all kept secure and the equipment's working properly? Can you explain all that stuff to us?
Sure. So the ballots in the polling place, the election workers at the end of the night, they take the ballots out of the tabulator and they seal them in a container that's been approved by the Board of County Canvassers. So those bags have to be recertified every 4 years. So those bags are inspected for rips and tears, and they all have the ability to be sealed. In what we you can't make anything tamper proof. What we do in elections is we make things tamper evident. So they're sealed in such a way that if the seal would be broken, we would be able to know that it was broken. So we record the seal number in multiple places, including inside of the bag in a way that it's not accessible to change it. Then we seal them, and then we record that in the separate poll book. And that poll book is in triplicate. So one page that has the seal number will go to the county clerk, one page will go to the chief judge of the probate court, and one will stay with my office. So we have that record of what that seal was. And then they bring those ballots physically back with them election night, riding together in one car, a Republican and a Democrat, come here. We take the ballots from them. We review various other portions of their paperwork. Same thing with the absentee ballots. Those get sealed up at the end of the election night in a similar way, and they stay here. And the ballots stay with the city or township clerk unless and until there would be a recount. So we just keep them in a locked room and secured. And then we do have post-election audits, procedural audit, where the county clerk staff will come and the state does a drawing of precincts, and then the county clerks are assigned to come and review those precincts and verify that everything was properly sealed, that the number of ballots reported to have been cast still matches the number, and they actually added that they actually pick an office on that ballot and double check that the results are matching. Also, all day long in the precincts, the tabulator is counting the votes as it goes. And then at the end of the night, the election inspectors print off a report that says which candidate got how many votes. And then all of the election workers that are present at the night, they sign so they can verify. They're not verifying the actual numbers. They're verifying that was the tape that came out of the machine at the end of the night. So then that tape, and then they bring the memory cards in, and those get uploaded to the county, but that's only preliminary. And then the County Board of Canvassers compares the printed reports with the uploaded reports to make sure that nothing happened during the upload portion. So we have a lot of security measures in place to make sure, and part of it involves physical security, printed documents, so that we know, what the results were, and we can tie that back to what was released. And we have the physical ballot, so we could go back and recount those and verify that count. So a lot of security measures in place. And then depending on the election, those ballots are kept for a city election. It's only for 30 days after the certification of the vote. For a federal election, it's 22 months. So we're storing those ballots. We still have the presidential ballots stored on site here. And then other records are kept up to 6 years. The application for an absentee ballot, or the application you fill out in the polling place, that's kept for 6 years.
Well,
we have a lot of records in storage.
And what about the equipment itself? Because that's some rumors circulated around equipment. How is that kept secure?
So each election is programmed at the county level, and then they provide us with the programming. And then there's promulgated rules about how we test that equipment. So we do what's called a test of predetermined results, where we test certain things that that it correctly counts if you votes, if you overvote, that it correctly does things. If you overvote proposal, that it doesn't cancel out any of your other votes. And so there's various specific things that we test. And then we test every tabulator before it gets sent out. And once we put the programming in, we seal it with, again, a tamper evident seal. So we know that no one has gone in and changed the programming, switched out the programming, with something that's going to do something differently than what we, had tested it for. So, again, it's that we test it ahead. And then, in fact, we do a sample test in the public view, although unfortunately we don't really have many people show up, but we have a public test of the equipment where we advertise it, and members of the public are welcome to come and watch us test, put those test ballots through and make sure that it gives us the results that that we expected.
That's interesting. I didn't know that at all. So last question, unfortunately, I have to ask this one.
Okay.
Sadly, we are in the world that we live in now, we have to deal with misinformation and disinformation. This has been an issue, probably of long standing, but I at least have noticed it a great deal in the last few years. So what steps can the clerk take to protect against the spread of misinformation? Is there something a clerk might do?
Well, I think being open and transparent is the most important thing. And that's what I try to do. And, I share information with candidates. I let them know when ballots are going out, so that, just so they have a sense, and they can purchase reports from us. They can get a list of who's getting an absentee ballot every day. And it's pretty inexpensive to do that. We don't charge much. We just want to cover our time. And there are just so many, but the outreach, the publicity, and the fact that we try and be completely transparent and answering myths. I believe in, when I get a call from a reporter, I respond and I give them the best information I can. And when I get an email from an irate voter, I respond and I give them the information as best as I can. And when I get an email from a happy voter with a question, I respond and give them the information as best as I can.
Thank you, Chris. You've done an amazing job of covering this very complex topic. Did we leave anything out on the way?
I think you did a great job of covering this.
Someone made me all the questions.
Oh.
So if there aren't any more questions on my sheet and nothing else that pops into your head, then please know how grateful we are for your participation this evening and for the valuable work that you and your fellow clerks do every day, not just election day, to protect this democracy. And I'm going to turn it now back over to Ben and Donna, and if any other questions came in, they can take over.
Oh, thank you so much, Jacqueline, and Chris, thank you. This is very helpful. I personally learned a lot, and I thought I knew a lot. So I hope this was helpful for folks. Just a couple items to report on. We will be streaming this live or throughout the week. It will be appearing in your news feeds. So we appreciate those who are able to tune in live, as well as those who will be watching us on demand. And then we'll be sharing a video link as well with our friends. And I think we'll be working, Donna and I will talk with Chris and his team about distributing maybe a one pager with some of the key takeaways from today, because I think this is very informative. So if you would like to get involved in any of the grassroots efforts here in Michigan, you can follow All Voting is Local. We're working with a number of amazing organizations, including the League of Women Voters. So we'd be very happy to connect you with those groups. But there's going to be a lot of work to do in 2022. So feel free to sign up for our email list at All Voting is Local. If you have any election needs or questions, michigan.gov/vote is a fantastic website. We're very fortunate that the Secretary of State and her team do a great job of maintaining that and providing all the information you need. And then, of course, you can go to the Lansing City Clerks website as well for your local needs. And then, Donna, would you like to plug anything for the League of Women Voters before we sign off?
Absolutely. Our website is lwvlansing.org, and you can learn about the league there. We're always happy to have new members. We actually have the ability to give you a trial membership so you can see whether you like us. And we're wonderful. You can tell that. You just met Jacqueline and me, and you don't have to have white hair to join, but you're welcome if you do. We have male members too, and student members.